Following the discharge of the pistols and the solemn reality of widowers settling upon Mrs. Hawkey, the judicial proceedings commenced, unfurling a tapestry woven with the intricate threads of scandal, desire, and honor. It was in that sinister April of 1845 that the paths of Mr. James Seton and the Hawkey couple intersected amidst the opulent galas and opulent ceremonies of the Victorian epoch. Mr. Seton, a man of comfortable means and married himself, found himself drawn to the captivating Mrs. Isabella Hawkey, wife of Lieutenant Henry Hawkey of the esteemed Royal Marines. Seton's unremarkable military career, now retired, afforded him ample leisure to frequent Mrs. Hawkey's abode during her husband's absences on military duties. Initially, his overtures manifested as benign and courteous gestures, such as accompanying Mrs. Hawkey on strolls or lending her peculiar literary volumes. However, as the weeks unfolded, Seton's longing emboldened him to voice his hitherto unspoken desires, lamenting the futility of pretense and beseeching Mrs. Hawkey to grant him an audience. Yet, he confessed to Mrs. Hawkey his apprehension of risking life and limb for naught, fearing Lieutenant Hawkey's discovery of his amorous intentions towards his wife. In the annals of European aristocracy, the duel had long served as the arbiter of disputes, especially those entangled in matters of honor, dignity, and perceived affronts. Originating from the medieval era's trial by combat, the Renaissance era elevated the concept of chivalric duty and etiquette, thereby entwining the early modern gentleman in the intricate web of honor-bound obligations. The solemn descent from one's lofty abode to meet the call of dueling grounds symbolized the convergence of tradition and duty, where individuals met ignominy with cold steel. Central to the ritual of dueling was the pursuit of satisfaction, an abstract notion not merely rooted in the act of inflicting mortal harm but rather in the demonstration of one's readiness to sacrifice life for honor. While earlier epochs had witnessed the clang of swords settling matters of honor, in England had transitioned to the pistol, where a well-placed shot could render a swift and final verdict. Despite monarchs' attempts to abolish dueling and the intellectual elite's condemnation of its perceived barbarity, the practice endured into the 19th century, preserved with zealous fervor among military circles. As fate would have it, a knock upon Seton's door heralded the arrival of Lieutenant Edward Pym, a confidant of Mr. Hawkey. Rumors of Seton's dalliances were on the verge of reaching Lieutenant Hawkey's ears, yet Seton remained undeterred in his pursuit of Mrs. Hawkey's affection. Subsequent encounters saw Seton's ardor intensify, culminating in a proposal of elopement to London and a renouncement of his marital vows. Yet, despite Mrs. Hawkey's outward displays of aloofness, the tide of passion surged forth during a fateful ball on the eve of May 19th. As the clock struck midnight on May 19th, another lavish ball unfolded in the grand ballrooms of Victorian society. Seton, fueled by his growing affection for Mrs. Hawkey, seized the chance to share a dance with her, much to the lieutenant's quiet acquiescence. After their dance, Seton stubbornly remained seated beside Mrs. Hawkey, ignoring the lieutenant's unspoken request to step aside. Sensing tension brewing, the lieutenant finally confronted Seton, requesting a private chat away from prying eyes. In a secluded corner, their voices hushed but their emotions running high, Seton and the lieutenant exchanged words tinged with both fervor and frustration. Their conversation carried the weight of unspoken rivalry, each man vying for Mrs. Hawkey's attention with a sense of urgency that belied their genteel surroundings. Seton emerged from the tense confrontation with a dubious excuse, claiming his former cavalry background made it inappropriate for him to duel a Royal Marine. However, Lieutenant Hawkey was not willing to let the matter rest. In a bold move, he publicly challenged Seton, calling him a scoundrel and threatening to horsewhip him if he refused to face him in a duel. The next morning, a representative arrived at the Hawkey residence bearing a formal challenge on behalf of Seton. According to the protocol of dueling, known as the Code of Honor, each party appointed seconds to oversee the proceedings. Despite attempts at reconciliation, the confrontation escalated, and a duel was inevitable. Accompanied by his trusted second, Lieutenant Pym, Hawkey embarked on the solemn journey to the chosen dueling ground, a secluded beach shrouded in a somber mist. There, they met Seton and his second, and the terms of the duel were agreed upon, a distance of 15 paces, pistols at the ready. As the command to fire echoed across the desolate shoreline, the pistols discharged. Hawkey's weapon failed to fire, while Seton's shot found its mark. Despite the initial exchange, Hawkey demanded another round, determined to settle the score. In a swift and faithful moment, another shot rang out, this time striking Seton in the hip. In the aftermath of the duel, Seton's wounds proved fatal, despite the efforts of renowned surgeons to save him. Lieutenant Pym, implicated in the affair, faced trial for his role in the deadly confrontation. The defense argued that dueling was an archaic practice rooted in notions of honor and obligation, but the judge reminded the jury that in the eyes of English law, such actions amounted to premeditated murder, regardless of tradition. The jury, after a brief deliberation, stunned the courtroom by swiftly declaring Lieutenant Pym not guilty. The decision was met with a mixture of relief and disbelief among the spectators. The case had gripped the public's attention, and many had expected a different outcome. 3 months later, when Lieutenant Hawkey stood before the court, the jury wasted no time in reaching their verdict. Within seconds, they acquitted him of all charges, bringing an abrupt end to the legal proceedings. The speed of the decision left little doubt about the jury's confidence in Hawkey's innocence. However, the drama surrounding the duels was far from over. Years later, Isabella found herself embroiled in a scandalous affair with another officer, Lieutenant Swain. The rumors of her infidelity tormented Captain Hawkey, who lamented the tragic consequences of his previous duel. He grappled with feelings of guilt and remorse, questioning whether he was destined to repeat the cycle of violence. The last fatal duel on English soil occurred in the same year, a grim reminder of the deadly consequences of honor and pride. It involved French expatriates and was sparked by an insult regarding an ex-girlfriend. Dueling, once a common practice among the aristocracy, had all but vanished from English society, but its legacy lingered on in the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed its tragic consequences. Despite his efforts to protect his honor, Hawkey's marriage ultimately fell apart. Isabella, estranged from her husband and children, remarried a man much younger than herself. The defense counsel at Pym's trial had once remarked on Isabella's beauty and the fervent pursuit of her affections, a pursuit that had led to the fateful confrontation between Seton and Hawkey, a confrontation that would go down in history as the last fatal duel between Englishmen on their native soil.